I really think that there is so much um, impact of doing poetry personally, even if you never share it. And I think, especially with emotional vulnerability, what it can do for people is really important. And I know you do a lot of community outreach and a lot of work within your community. And I think writing workshops too. Is that
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So, how do you think the narrative can be changed with poetry or spoken word, or however you want to describe it, for younger people who might be struggling, who are looking to cope with their situation or their mental health or their emotional, um, maybe they don't have an outlet otherwise? How do you think that could help people, and how do you think things should be shifted so that's not as, looked at like something that you only do if you're really emotional, or if you're really this or really that?
So, well, I grew up in school that poetry was for suckers, right? You was a nerd, you was an outcast if you did poetry. But for me, poetry saved my life. Poetry helped me build a business, two businesses actually. Poetry gave me the wings to do workshops, motivational speaking, poetry in other countries and around the country. Poetry helped me solve problems that I was working through within myself, right? Poetry allowed me to sprinkle pieces of me in my poems, right? Poetry gave me a voice that I couldn't find sometimes any other way. But not only when it gave me that voice, it also gave me a divider where I could say it's me or I could say it's not me. And so it depends on my level of comfort. Some of the main things that poetry does for individuals, it teaches them how to tell their story or a story. It builds confidence, right? Poetry helps individuals define their messaging. Poetry helps individuals to connect to other individuals, to groups, to community, to the universe as a whole. And so whether it's an African American kid, a white kid, or whatever color the kid is, and regardless of their background, all of us at times feel muted. And poetry gives us that power back, whether we perform it in front of anybody else or just write it on the pages of our notebooks. Poetry is freedom. And so for me, mentioning or shaping poetry or pitching poetry as a form of freedom, of nonviolence, right? Of escape. That is what poetry does, I think, for each and every individual that takes that chance on writing one word. One word. That's what I challenge people in my workshop. Give me one word. Give me an issue. Sometimes people don't have anything to write about, right? And I will tell them, write me a poem why you don't want to be in this workshop. And they can riff it off, right? Poetry is everything. From how we communicate with our friends, how we first try to introduce ourselves or communicate with the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever your preference is, right? We put words together, and in my eyes, those words and how they flow can be poetry, prose, or whatever. So poetry is part of the foundation of how we communicate. So it's a part of our life. For me, it's a gateway to freedom and opportunity.